Hey you! Yeah you! Before we get into the video, I just want you to know if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to smash that like button, click the subscribe button to become one of the darkness, and smash that bell boy to get updates on those crazy videos you might miss out on. Don't miss out on those crazy videos now, it'll be bad luck for it, won't it? So anyway, let's get into the vid.
I killed so many women, I have a hard time keeping them straight. I wanted to kill as many women I thought were prostitutes as I possibly could. Is that true?
Yes.
Welcome back to the Souls of the Damned, and this is the disturbing case of the Green River Killer. Welcome back to another file on the most crazed and demented killers out there. Today we head to the 80s to discuss a depraved individual that took notes from certain two other sex worker killers and wreaked havoc on that industry. So hide your wives or basically any women you know. This is Gary Leon Ridgeway, aka the Green River Killer. Gary Leon Ridgeway was born on February 18th, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. So he and his family could have a 50-50 chance of being Mormons when you think about it, as Utah has as many wives as one state after all. He was the second and middle child of his parents Thomas and Mary Ridgeway. But no, home life wasn't all roses and sunshine for little Gary, as home life was reported to be seriously troubled. Relatives of his said that his mother was super domineering, who let a woman have a voice in the 50s. There are many fights in the household, especially between the father and mother. The father himself was a bus driver who despised sex workers, so nothing has really changed these days, have they? Ridgeway, until he was 13, had a huge bedwetting problem, which I'm sure some of you watching can relate to. Apparently each time he did this, his mother would wash his genitals, which he later said to psychologists that might have started his deep sexual appetites and had several conflicting feelings that included anger and sexual attraction towards his mother, and thought about killing her many times. Naggy mothers, huh? Ridgeway also had dyslexia, and considering that was less understood back then, it was held back a year in high school. But he did have an IQ of being in the low 80s, so that might have something to do with it. When he was 16, he tried to commit his first kill, which surprisingly wasn't a sex worker or a runaway. But even more heinous, he stabbed a 6-year-old boy who he led into the woods and stabbed through the ribs all the way to the liver. Luckily though, the boy did survive the attack. Later on, Ridgeway eventually graduated from high school, which was Tyee High School, located in the Washington state. Did he move at some point? He then went on to marry immediately to his 90-year-old girlfriend Claudia Craig, which wouldn't last long, as you'll soon see. He also joined the United States Army. This guy's a military vet. Son of a bitch! And served in Vietnam, where he served on board a supply ship but also saw some combat. But none of that interested him, as during his time with the military, Ridgeway had frequent intercourse with sex workers and did it so much that he contracted gonorrhea.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Which he was furious about, but still continued without protection. This man is a walking Darwin moment. This is also what caused his marriage to end with Claudia. They're alright, man. Noam changes people. He eventually married another woman named Marcia Winslow, which again didn't last long, as he was already into his extreme sex addiction at this point, and the gonorrhea if he still had that. He claimed he liked to place her in a chokehold during sex, which is creepy as it sounds. And another thing he mentions, that around this time he got deep into religion and went door to door trying to convert people, while also reading the Bible out loud at work and at home. He also wanted his wife to follow the strict teachings of his local pastor. All this was a cover, as he was still having intercourse with several sex workers at the time, and that's typical of people using religion as a front. According to many women in his life, he had an insatiable sexual appetite which was never fueled and needed more and more, which led to him being divorced 3 times and begin his killing ways. His killings began in the most earliest of 80s as his lust for more and more sex could not be contained, and it's mainly the 80s where a majority of his killings occurred while some were done in the 90s, and at least murdered up to 71 women even though he was only charged for 49 of them. And usually with serial killers, they amp up and pretend they killed more to make themselves more terrifying when they actually didn't. Usually his method of killing was driving around in his truck looking for those supposed women of the night and take part in sexual relations. He would also show pictures of his son to make the women trust him more. If I was them I wouldn't, as he's clearly married, but that's probably all they expected from him at the time. As sex wasn't enough for him anymore, after he had intercourse with the girls, he would strangle them to death by wrapping his forearm around them and using his other arm to pull. So weirdly and notably clean death with any blood to be spilled. He was also a noted necrophiliac. I guess he'd like to crack open a cold one.
The SeaTac strip where he would meet his first victim, Wendy Caulfield.
On July 8th, 1982, presumably on a hot day, the first victim of Ridgeway's Wendy Caulfield disappeared, and just a few days later her body was found and just left on the Green River where most of his victims were dumped, and coined his nickname, the Green River Killer. Just a few days after this, his second victim, Giselle Ann Lavon, went missing, probably around the same area on July 17th. He obviously took women in his area and dumped the bodies somewhat close, so he didn't need to go far, so he wouldn't arouse any suspicion. But for Giselle's body, she was the sixth body to be found after the previous four were found, and this is where the bodies which were taken, but only to be found months or years later, while others were found in only just a few weeks. I know it can be a bit brain racking looking at this, even more disturbing that the bodies were usually left naked and at times in poses. He actually got arrested in 1982 and was booked in at King County, Washington. An investigation kinda already started at this point, and an unusual but well-known person helped in his case. Ted Bundy himself aided in and offered his own opinions, psychologically and motivations. But even after doing several tests on Ridgeway, he was let go as his arrest was only for prostitution and not related to any of his crimes. And in the mid-80s married his third wife by the name of Judith Mawson, while he continued with his depraved killings over the rest of the 80s. The investigation of the killings probably began after the second disappearance, as a one-off murder would be quickly shrugged off if not much evidence or witnesses were found. But of course, more and more victims turned up and a full-on investigation started. The King County Sheriff Office formed the Green River Task Force, a group of people that clearly saw some things, and probably not good things, and this is probably how Ridgeway got booked the first time for prostitution, and was a suspect in 83, but after a few tests, including a polygraph test which detects if you're lying or not, somehow Ridgeway managed to pass that and others. They're not always accurate, but this was a huge mistake as he went on to kill more while the police made a huge error. They did collect hair and saliva samples from him though, which would come in handy later. A bit too late later. Early on in the investigation is where Ted Bundy aided the police in trying to find Ridgeway. Both have similarities in the way they killed, as they both killed women and only women. He gave the motivations for that a killer like this would do, and even suggested that the killer was revisiting the area to have sex with the bodies, which, well, disturbingly was true. But even with Bundy's help, they didn't get the killer in the early investigation, and Bundy was later executed in 1989. Another contributor was an FBI agent called John Edward Douglas, who developed a profile of the suspect, which also clearly didn't work. The investigation stalled while the bodies piled high, but those DNA samples collected will be the key. The years went by with little leads of whom killed the girls, while several more bodies were found, like finding remains of skulls and other body parts on the Green River and more. Soon the killing stopped as soon as the 80s ended, and most of the 90s didn't fare better in trying to find who was the killer, while Ridgeway was on his third wife and working a spray painter job at a truck factory. Weird thing to work as, but if it brings in the dough. So he lived a peaceful life until November 30th, 2001. He was arrested over the DNA samples collected back in the 80s, and also while at work. Imagine explaining that to your boss. He was got on his DNA being linked to the crime scenes after matching with his saliva. The semen analysis was found on victims by the likes of Marcia Chapman, Oprah Mills, Deborah Boner, Deborah East and many others. And those two had spray paint spears from the same place he was working at. So that boss is real mad. Ridgeway was taken into custody and a couple of years later, questioning began.
To treat you a certain way. What did you want to do to your mom here?
I wanted her to stop being angry at me for not knowing how to...
But she wasn't stopping.
No, she wasn't stopping.
Was she?
Just a fantasy of wanting to have sex, touch her, feel her body, have her show me how to have sex. Because mothers teach you a lot of things, you know. It's just a fantasy. It's something she wouldn't do it, but it's...
What would, in your fantasy, what would your mom have you do to her?
Have me do to her, my fantasy would be to explore, to find different things what a woman has, girls have that guys don't have. A woman would get in the car.
She's already in the car?
She's in the car. Let's say she's always in the car. We're driving down the road, and she wants to see my ID. So I whip out my ID, and with my ID would be I'd put my finger over my driver's license to hide my name. But on the opposite side was pictures. And a picture of my son. And they would see my son, and they would know I was probably a normal person.
But you were really using your son as part of your ruse.
At the time I didn't want to picture my ex-wife there, so I had a picture of my son.
Sure, you had to make it sound good.
I had a driver's license on one side, my ID, and then when I showed and then the next picture was my son, so that was, and in the vehicle I had always had some, not always, but had some of my son's stuff in there, you know. In the South Airport area, and took her into an area, and my son was there, and I killed her. I'm real sure my son didn't see it.
After several questions and interrogations, he revealed where more of the bodies were. His lawyers also made him avoid the death penalty. Who was his lawyer? This guy? Your Honour, my client was just down bad. He was sentenced to 48 life sentences on December 18th, 2003, giving everyone a wonderful early Christmas present, and was imprisoned at Washington State Pen. And if you wonder where he is today, well, he's still alive, and still at Washington State Pen. So head on down and say hi, or for an autograph if you wish. I'm sure he's an incel icon. These are the list of victims he left in his wake, and it's long, so don't go anywhere. Wendy Cotfield, Giselle Ann Lavon, Deborah Lembona, Marcia Faye Chapman, Cynthia Jean Hinds, Opal Charmaine Mills, Terry Rain Milligan, Mary Bridget Mihan, Deborah Lorraine S, Linda Jane Rule, Denise Dossell Bush, Shonda Lee Summers, Shirley Marie Shirley, Rebecca Becky Moraro, Colleen Renee Brockman, Alma Ann Smith, Dolores Laverne Williams, Gail Lynn Matthews, Andrea Marion Childers, Sandra K. Gilbert, Kimmy Kai Pistor, Marie M. Malva, Carol Ann Christensen, Martina Fraser O'Forley, Cheryl Lee Wims, Yvonne Shelley Antos, Carrie Ann Ross, Constance Elizabeth Naron, Kelly Marie Ware, Tina Marie Thompson, April Dawn Batram, Debbie May Apathy, Tracy Ann Winston, Maureen Sue Freeney, Mary Sue Bellow, Pammy Annette Avent, Denise Louise Plager, Kimberly L. Nelson, Lisa Yates, Mary Exeter West, Cindy Ann Smith, Patricia Michelle Buziak, Patricia Lellarobe, and 2 unidentified Jane Does, and there's also many more bodies left to uncover, and Ridgeway isn't saying a word. So this ends the story of the brave individual known as the Green River Killer, but anyone knows it isn't over. Could you be living next door, or even married to a serial killer, or possibly in the area of one? History is filled with these crazy individuals, or per se, this. Hey. Subscribing and liking the vids does go a long way on the channel. But what if you want to support me even further? Then I have something for you, acolytes. I have a Patreon with 4 tiers going up to £30 is the max, so easily affordable. And if you want to go a step further, subscribing to my Patreon will give you many special benefits like early access to my videos and behind the scenes content. So you are getting many gifts in return for supporting me and the channel. So the link is in the description, and thank you for helping me in the long run.